Hello, and welcome to Peter Presents Iliad. Now, before we begin, I just want to do another regular introduction, because it seems that last episode there actually were a good number of you watching this show and leaving comments, but YouTube, it seems, had glitched up a little bit or something, and I couldn't see those comments. But a lot of you actually messaged me and said, hey, just so you know, there were people there, and I've been able to go back and look at the comments that were there. And so I thought, although we normally end these episodes with me going through the chat, which is honestly one of my favorite things to do, it's become that way, I thought it would be good to start this episode with last episode's chat, so we get that out of the way. But in looking through, there really was one sort of question involved. Let's see. Oopsie. Hang on. I've got sound going now. Alright, so in episode 7, the comments read as follows. Most of them were just saying, like, hey, there's something wrong with the chat, there's something wrong with it. So I thank you all for persevering through that and watching the episode as it was going on. So thank you, and for letting me know that people actually were commenting. That's very good. But let's see. One comment was from Benji the Koi Boy. Benji said, I need to start making steak before these streams. Well, I agree, Benji. I have it on good authority that Benji actually plays chess while he listens to this sometimes. So I hope you've got a nice rare steak there for you, Benji, and that you're enjoying this episode as well. Let's see. Goram Darth Cal, our Firefly, Star Wars, and Game of Thrones fan, says, this was not a great time for oxen, and honestly, I could not agree more. I don't know, like, I have a hard time believing that anyone had this many oxen, because you keep hearing about how they were slaughtered by the hundreds, which is insane to me. But yeah, so we got that, not a good time for oxen. We got pour one out for Zeus from Benji the Koi Boy. Yes, because the Greeks would pour out some wine before drinking and pouring libations for their favorite gods, and in this case Zeus, because when we last left our heroes, what ended up happening was that Zeus was thundering, and a couple of wine ships had come over to the beach camp that the Greeks had, and people were getting wine and getting drunk and being very scared of what the next day would bring. So they were like, Zeus, please don't kill me, as they were going. And let's see. Bubba the Musician said, don't get any ideas, and chivalry. Now, I'm not sure at what point those were brought in for when you said those. So, Bubba, if there's anything you want to have tacked on to that or whatever, please just put it in our chats for now, and I'll get to that at the end of this episode. And I'm gonna check real quick to make sure there's no technical difficulties. Okay, looks like the chat's going pretty well. So with that, I think we can just about get underway here. Excellent. Very good. So also real quick though, I did prepare another something for you, which was I mentioned that there is an Acropolis in Troy, or Homer mentions that, and at the top of this Acropolis is Athena's temple, which is very interesting because she's against the Trojans, but also the Acropolis that is the famous one now was in Athens, Athena, and the Parthenon, her famous temple was at the top of that one. So for Greeks listening to this story about how the Trojans had an Acropolis with Athena's temple on top of it, and then, of course, a very famous Greek city, Athens, having that, it could be very interesting. Just over the years, because as I think I said before, it wasn't until after the Persian Wars that Athens really became a more well-known big city. So that still means Iliad from Homer had been around for about 400-ish years before anyway. So yeah, but I want to just show you, Acropolis-wise, this is a picture of course, the Parthenon being reconstructed when I was about 13 years old, and that figure in the lower middle with the jaunty pose and the rather awesome hat is, in fact, me. Yes, enjoying Greece with my family. And perhaps as more things become relevant, I'll show you more pictures of that. But yeah, so that is the Parthenon. And they actually have since pretty much rebuilt basically the whole thing with special laser cutting technology to make sure that the pieces of marble that filled in the gaps were perfectly sized, and you can look at pictures of it today, but they were working on that while I was there, and you can see the scaffolding over to the left as well. So it's really something spectacular that they've done. In fact, it wasn't until I think it was the 1800s that the Parthenon really got severely damaged, because there was, you guessed it, another war going on in Greece, and that was where they kept the armory and the munitions in the Parthenon during a battle, and that got hit by a cannon or something, and it blew off the back end of the Parthenon. So a lot of the damage that you see now really was a lot more recently made than you might initially think. Anyhow, so yeah, there's also apparently something important about the Parthenon where there are no straight lines in it with the architecture. I don't know how true that is, but yeah, just something to bring up. Anyhow, alright, so when we last left our heroes, the Greeks were getting plastered on wine, and they had built a wall that I mistakenly thought was already there, and the gods, Zeus in particular, was planning something horrible for the Greeks. So remember Thetis, Achilles' mom, yes, that guy who we haven't seen since I think book 1, Thetis' mom, who's highlighted in the bottom left there. I think I keep forgetting to put this frame up. Sorry about that. Hopefully you're following along. She had convinced Zeus to turn the tide in favor of the Trojans until the Greeks needed her son back again. So we haven't seen Zeus really do anything for that, and we haven't really seen Achilles either. But we shall see what happens in this episode. So, without further delay, let us begin Iliad, Book 8. I hope you have something nice to drink with you. Dawn, saffron light over all the earth. Zeus, who plays in thunder, had the gods assembled on the utmost peak of the rugged Olympic massif, and now enjoyed their undivided attention. Listen to me, divine ones, so I can tell you what I want. What I don't want is any god, male or female, attempting to brook my word. You are all to assent, so we can get this over with. If I catch any one of you with a private plan to assist either the Greeks or Trojans, he or she will return to Olympus a crippled wreck. Unless, of course, I hurl him or her into moldy Tartarus, down into the deepest underground abyss, iron-gated and bronze-stooped, as far beneath Hades as the sky is above earth. Then you will know who is supreme around here. Or would you like to find out now? Come on. Hang a gold cable down from the sky. All you gods and goddesses holding the end couldn't drag down from sky to earth Zeus, the master, no matter how hard you tried. But if I wanted to, I could haul up all of you with the earth itself and the very sea, then loop the cable around the spur of Olympus, and the totality would hang suspended in space. That's how superior I am to gods and men." They were stunned to silence, aghast at his words. It had been a masterful speech. Finally, gray-eyed Athena spoke up. "Well, our Father, who art the highest, we know very well your might is unyielding. Still, we have pity for the Danaan spearmen who are now destined to die an ugly death. We will withdraw from the war if you command it, but we will still advise the Greeks so they won't all be casualties of your wrath." And Zeus, smiling at her, answered, There, daughter, my heart really isn't in it. I want to be gentle to you, child." With that, he harnessed his horses, bronze-hooved, gold-maned, and swift, and clothed himself in gold, and gripped his golden whip, and stepped onto his chariot, and with a touch of his lash they were off, flying between earth and starry universe. He came to Ida with its springs and wild beasts, a mountain mother, and to Gorgorus there, where his precinct and smoking altar stood. There Zeus reined in his horses, unhitched them from the car, and shed upon them a heavy mist. Then he sat among the peaks, exulting in glory, with the city of Troy and the Greek ships in view. The Greeks were taking a hurried meal in their huts, and then armed themselves quickly. Likewise, the Trojans throughout the city, a smaller army, but much more desperate to engage the enemy. They were fighting for their children and for their wives. All the gates were opened, and the troops poured through them on foot and in war cars. When the two sides closed with each other, they slammed together shields and spears, rawhide ovals pressed close, bronze thoraxes grinding against each other, and the groans of men being slain and the cries of those slaying hung in the air as the earth ran with blood. As long as the holy light climbed toward noon, soldiers on both sides were hit and fell. But when the sun straddled heaven's meridian, the Father stretched out his golden scales. On them he placed two dooms of agonizing death, one for the Trojans, one for the Greeks. He held the scales in the middle, and down sank the Greek day of doom, down to the fertile earth, while the Trojans soared up to the sky's expanse. Then Zeus thundered from Ida and sent a blazing flash into the Greek army. The soldiers gaped in wonder, and their blood turned milky with fear. Idomeneus lost his nerve and ran, followed by Agamemnon and both Ajaxes. Nestor was the only Greek commander left. Not that he wanted to stay, but Paris, Helen's fair-haired lord, had hit his trace horse with an arrow to the forelock, and the animal reared in pain, pawing the air frantically and throwing the other horses into confusion as it writhed against the bronze point in its brain. The old man was cutting the traces with his sword when the horses of an enemy chariot loomed ahead. Hector's horses, and yes, Hector himself at the reins. Nestor's death would have been assured had not Diomedes had all this in sharp focus. His soldiers' yell boomed across the plain to Odysseus. "Son of Laertes, Odysseus, the clever Ithacan! Watch out, or you don't catch an arrow in your back, retreating like some gutless wonder! Come on, let's save the old man from this maniac!" Odysseus didn't hear, or pretended not to. He went right past toward the Achaean ships, no matter. Alone as he was, Diomedes shouldered his way over to Nestor's horses, and taking his hand, said to the old man, "Here you are, old and broken down with all these young bruises at your throat. Your driver isn't much help either, is he? Here, get up into my chariot and see what the horses of Tros can do. They know how to eat up the plain and how to cut and turn in pursuit or in flight. I got them from Aeneas, a pair of real terrors. Our men can mind your horses as you and me. Let's drive this team straight at the Trojans so that Hector can feel my spear's bite." That was enough for the old Gerenian horsemen. Sthenelus and Eurymedon tended their mares, and Nestor got in with Diomedes, taking the silky reins and touching the horses with the lash. They closed ground quickly, and Diomedes threw as Hector came at them, missing his target but hitting Hector's driver, Enopeus, square in the chest as he held the reins. He fell from the chariot, the horses swerved, and Enopeus' soul crawled off in the dust. Hector took his death hard, but let him lie there as he went off to find another charioteer, and soon found Archeptolemus, Iphitus' son. Hector had him mount behind the horses, and put the reins in his hands. Things would have gone badly for the Trojans then, and would have been penned in like Iliad lambs, had Father Zeus not had all this in sharp focus. He thundered terribly and threw a white lightning bolt that landed in front of Diomedes' horses and shot up in a flame of burning sulfur. The horses shied and backed into the car. The reins slipped out of Nestor's hands, and with fear in his heart he said to Diomedes, "Son of Tydeus, turn your horses around. Zeus has given this man the glory today. Another day he may give it to us, but no one can change the purpose of Zeus." And Diomedes, good at the war cry, "Yes, old sir, everything you say is right, but it cuts deep that Hector will someday crow, 'I made Tydeus' son turn tail and run.' When he makes that boast to the men of Troy, I'd just as soon fall through the crack in the earth." And Nestor, the Gerenian horseman, "What a thing for wise Tydeus' son to say! Hector may call you a coward and weakling, but the Trojans will not agree with him, nor will the Dardanians, nor will the widows of all those men you laid low in the dust." And he wheeled the horses around and fled, back through the tumult, with howling Trojans raining barbed missiles at them from behind, and Hector's taunting voice in their ears, "Son of Tydeus, the Greeks used to honor you with the best seat, full cups and red meat. No more. It turns out you're no better than a woman, a rag doll. Get out of here. Did you think I would just stand by and watch while you climbed our walls and carried our women off in your ships? I'll send you to hell first." Diomedes was tempted to wheel around and deal with Hector face to face. 3 times he wavered and was about to turn, and every time Zeus thundered from Ida, signaling that it was the Trojans' turn to win. Hector shouted to his troops, "Trojans, Lycians, Dardanian soldiers, remember to fight like the men that you are. Zeus, I know, has decreed glory for me and victory, and for the Danaans, defeat. Look at this puny wall they've put up. It will never withstand the force of our attack, and our horses will easily jump this ditch. Once I get to their ships, get me some fire so I can burn the fleet and kill dazed Greeks in the smoke." Then he called to his horses, "Xanthus and Podargus, Aethon and Lampus, pay me back now for all the tender care Andromache, daughter of Aetion, showed you, setting out for you sweet mash with wine before serving a meal to me, her husband. Now pour on the speed so we can capture the world-renowned shield of Nestor, solid gold from the rods to the core, and Diomedes' corslet, forged by Hephaestus. If we could take both of these, we could expect the Greeks to sail away this very night." Thus Hector's vaunts, and Hera shook with rage, as she sat on her throne, making Olympus tremble. She turned to the great god Poseidon and said, "Ah, Earthshaker, you have all that power, but no pity in your heart for the Danaans dying, and yet they honor you with many lovely gifts at Helice and Aegaea, and up until now you wanted victory for them. If we had the will, all of us who favor the Greeks, to drive the Trojans back and hold Zeus in check, he would sit alone and frustrated up there on Ida." And the Earthshaker's troubled, gloomy response, "That's reckless talk, Hera. Far be it from me to endorse a fight between Cronian Zeus and all the rest of us. He is stronger by far." While they talked to each other this way, the space between the trenched wall and the ships was crammed with horses and men with shields, corralled there by Hector, son of Priam, and peer of swift Ares, Zeus's glory upon him. And he would have set fire to the upswept holes had not Hera put it in Agamemnon's mind to make a last-ditch effort to rouse the Greeks. He went through the Achaean ships and huts, clutching his great purple cloak, and took his stand on the huge black hull of Odysseus' ship, from which a shout would reach either end of camp, to Telamonian Ajax's quarters at one end and Achilles at the other, for these two heroes had drawn up their ships at the extremities, trusting their manhood and the strength of their hands. Agamemnon's voice reached every Greek ear. "For shame, Argives! You're nothing but poor excuses for soldiers. What happened to all our boasts, all the big talk that we were the best? Remember, Lemnos, all the beef and wine you ate there? Remember saying that each of you could take on 100 Trojans? 200? Well, now we can't even match one. This Hector, who is about to burn our ships. Father Zeus, has there ever been another mighty king whom you have blinded with blindness like this? Robbed him of glory as you have robbed me? And yet I never sailed past any altar of yours, I swear, on this misbegotten voyage here, without offering oxen at every single one in my zeal to make the rubble of the walls of Troy. At least, Zeus, grant me this prayer. Let my people escape. Don't let the Trojans annihilate the Achaeans like this." Zeus pitied his tears, and with a nod agreed that his people would not be destroyed. He sent an eagle, the surest omen on wings, holding in his talons a fawn, which he dropped beside the altar where the Achaeans sacrificed to oracular Zeus. When they saw that the bird had come from him, the Greeks smiled and counterattacked. Of all the Danaans, not one could claim to cross the trench and engage the enemy before Diomedes. The armored Trojan he killed was named Agelaus, Phredmon's son. He was in the act of wheeling his horses around when Diomedes planted a spear in his back with enough force to drive it out through his chest. He fell from his car with a clang of metal. Next out were the two sons of Atreus, followed by both Ajaxes, clothed in fury. Then came Idomeneus and his companion Meriones, who weighed in like Ares, and Eurypylus, Euaemon's fine son. Ninth was Teucer, stretching his bow. As he took his stand behind Ajax's shield, big Ajax would move his shield aside, and Teucer would spot his target and shoot. His victim would drop in his tracks, and Teucer would run back to Ajax like a child to its mother, and take cover again behind his shining shield. Teucer could do no wrong. In short order he killed Orsilochus, Ormenus, and Ophelistes, Dator, Chromius, and godlike Lycophontes, Polymion's son of Amopion, and Melanippus. When he had brought these down, one after another, his great bow devastating the Trojan ranks, Agamemnon took notice, and came by to say, Tucker, my man, son of Telamon, keep shooting like this, and you will save the day for the Greeks, and be the light of Telamon's life, who raised and cherished you in his own house, though you were a bastard. Today you can bring glory to him, and away as he is, and I give you my solemn word of honor. If Zeus, Aegis holder, and Athena allow me to strip Troy down to its stone foundations, I will place in your hand special reward, second only to mine, a cauldron, or a chariot and team, or a woman who will go to your bed. And Tokar, who was beyond reproach, most glorious son of Atreus, why urge me on when I'm at my top speed? I haven't let up since we started to push them back to the city. I just pick my spots and shoot Trojans dead. 8 long-tipped arrows I've let fly now, and all of them are stuck in some hero's flesh. There's only this one mad dog I can't hit. And he let another arrow jump from the string straight for Hector. He longed to hit him, but the arrow missed, finding instead the chest of Gorgithon, a son of Priam, by a woman from Asyme he had taken as wife, Castanera, beautiful as a goddess. His head sagged to one side like a poppy in a garden, heavy with seeds and spring rain. Gorgithian's head weighted with his helmet. Tokar let another arrow jump from the string straight for Hector. He longed to hit him, but missed again. This time, Apollo made the arrow swerve, and this time it hit Archeptolemus, Hector's charioteer, square in the chest as he hurled himself on. He fell from the chariot. The horses shied, and Archeptolemus' life drained away in the dust. Hector flushed with grief for his fallen driver, but let him lie there, and ordered Cebriones, who was his own brother and close at hand, to take the reins. Cebriones did so, and Hector vaulted down from his chariot with a blood-curdling scream. Scooping up a stone in one hand, he made straight for Tokar. He had drawn an arrow from his quiver, notched it on the string, and was pulling it back. He was taking dead aim at Hector in his shining helmet when the stone caught him just where the collarbone divides the neck from the chest, a vulnerable spot. The jagged rock broke the string. His hand went numb. He staggered, fell to his knees, and dropped the bow. When Ajax saw his brother go down, he straddled him and sheltered him with his shield, until 2 of his men, Megistius and Alistair, bore him, groaning heavily, back to the ships. Then once again the Olympian lifted the Trojan spirits, and they pushed the Greeks straight toward their deep ditch, with Hector out front, thoroughly enjoying himself. A hound goes after a wild hog or a lion, nipping at its buttocks from behind, sure of its own speed, but always watching for its prey to whirl around. Thus Hector pressed the long-haired Greeks, picking off the hindmost one by one. They were in full retreat until they passed the palisade and ditch. By then many had fallen. When they reached their ships, they halted and called out to each other and to every god they could think of, lifting their arms high, palms flat to heaven, while Hector wheeled his glossy horses right and left, staring toward the Greeks with eyes like a Gorgon's or like butchering Ares. Watching all this, Hera was moved to pity and said to Athena in a flurry of words, "Don't the 2 of us care any more that the Greeks are being beaten? This may be the end. One single man, Priam's son Hector, is pushing them all to the brink of doom. His rampage is no longer bearable. Just look at how much harm he has done." And the gray-eyed goddess said to her, "I would love to have this man snuffed out, killed by the Argives in his own native land. But my father is on a rampage himself now, and constantly thwarts all my best efforts. He has conveniently forgotten how many times I rescued his son Heracles when he was struggling with Eurystheus' labors. He would cry to heaven, and Zeus would dispatch me to save his neck. Had I been sharp enough to know all this when he was sent to Hades to fetch the hellhound, he never would have made it back from Styx. At any rate, Zeus hates me now and has executed the plan Thetis sold him on when she kissed his knees and grabbed his beard, begging him to honor her son Achilles, sacker of cities. Well, one day he'll call me his gray-eyed girl again. But for now, you get your horses ready, while I go to the house of Zeus, Aegis holder, and put on my war gear. I want to see the expression on Hector's helmeted face when we two appear in the lanes of battle. Many a Trojan will glut the dogs and birds with their soft flesh after they fall by the ships." Hera, the white-armed goddess, agreed, and the Queen of Heaven, daughter of Kronos, hastened to harness the gold-frontleted horses. Athena, meanwhile, Zeus's favorite daughter, let her supple robe slip down to her father's floor, this embroidered garment her own handiwork. She put on one of cloudy Zeus's tunics, strapped on her battle gear, and then stepped into the blazing chariot, cradling a spear long and thick enough for Heaven's daughter to level battalions of men in her wrath. Hera quickly flicked the horses with the lash, and the automatic gates of heaven groaned open as willed by the Hours, who control access to Olympus and heaven, opening and shutting the dense cloud banks. Through this gate they drove the patient horses. Zeus saw them from Ida and seethed with anger. He sent a golden-winged Iris to bear his message. "Go, swift Iris, turn them back, and don't let them come face to face with me. It would not be pretty if we had to fight. It is my solemn word on the subject. I will maim their horses, throw them from the chariot, and smash it to bits. Not in 10 circling years will they be healed of the wounds the thunderbolt will inflict. The gray-eyed one must learn what it means to fight with her father. As for Hera, I am not so angry with her, since she always opposes whatever I say." He spoke, and Iris stormed from Ida's peaks to the Olympic range, and caught them just at the gates, and repeated Zeus's words. "Where are you two off to in such a hurry? Zeus will not allow you to help the Greeks. This is his solemn word on the subject. He will maim your horses, throw you from the chariot, and smash it to bits. Not in 10 circling years will you be healed of the wounds the thunderbolt will inflict. That so you, Gray Eyes, will see what it means to fight with your father. Hera, he's not so upset with, since she always opposes whatever he says. But you are awesome indeed, and a fearless bitch if you dare lift your spear against Zeus." Iris spoke and was gone in a blur of wind. Hera turned to Athena and said, "Daughter of the Aegis holder, I can no longer countenance our fighting with Zeus for the sake of mere mortals. Let one fall and another live as chance may have it, and let Zeus judge by his own lights between Trojans and Greeks, as is only proper." With that she turned her hooved horses around. The Hours unyoked them for the goddesses, and tethered them at their ambrosial stalls, and leaned the chariot on the shining gateway. They went inside and sat on golden thrones with the other immortals, and nursed their grief. Zeus wheeled his chariot from Ida to Olympus, where the gods sat assembled. No one less than Poseidon unyoked his team, set the car on its stand, and draped it with a cloth, while Zeus rumbled onto his golden throne, and mighty Olympus trembled under his feet. Only Hera and Athena sat apart from Zeus, and failed to address him or ask him a question. He knew what was wrong, and said, Why are you two so upset, Athena and Hera? It's not battle fatigue. You two never get tired of pulverizing Trojans, your mortal enemies. It all comes down to this. These two hands are more powerful than all the gods on Olympus combined. As for you two, your shining limbs trembled before you got close enough to see the front lines. And it's just as well, because one thing is certain. Once you had been struck by my thunderbolt, you would never have made it back to Olympus. The two goddesses murmured to each other, huddling close and still scheming against Troy. Athena kept silent and said nothing out loud, although she was furious at her father Zeus. Hera, however, could not contain her anger. The awesome son of Kronos has spoken again! We're all too familiar with your irresistible strength. But we still feel pity for the Danaan spearmen, who are now destined to die an ugly death. Fine. We will withdraw from the war, if you command it, but we will still advise the Greeks so they won't all be casualties of your wrath. And Zeus, clouds gathering around him. At dawn you will see Kronos' almighty son, if you wish, my ox-eyed lady Hera, making casualties of much of the Greek army. Hector will not be absent from the war until Achilles has risen up from beside his ship, on the day when the fighting for Patroclus' dead body reaches its fever pitch by the ship's sterns. That is divinely decreed. Your wrath is nothing to me. Not even if you go to the deepest foundations of earth and sea, where Kronos and Iapetus dwell out of the light of Hyperion the sun, cooled by no winds in the trench of Tartarus. Not even then will I care that you are angry, because there is nothing more shameless than you. He spoke, and white-armed Hera said nothing. The sunlight fell into the ocean, drawing black night over Earth's fields. A sunset the Trojans resented, but to the Greeks, welcome. Thrice prayed for, ebony night. Hector made camp, leading the Trojans along the river some distance from the ships to an open space that was clear of the dead. They stepped to the ground from their chariots to hear Hector speak. In his hand was a spear 16 feet long, bronze point gleaming, the ferrule gold. Leaning on this spear, he addressed the troops. Hear me, Trojans, Dardanians, and allies. I had thought to destroy the Greeks and their ships, and be back by now to windy Ilion, but darkness intervened. This more than anything has saved them and their fleet parked on our beach. So for now let us yield to black night and prepare our supper. Unyoke your horses and feed them. Bring cattle and sheep from the city, and get bread and mellow wine from your houses, and gather tons of firewood, so that all night long until early dawn we can burn fires enough to light up the sky in case the long-haired Greeks have any idea of sailing off by night. We'll not let them board their ships at ease or without a fight. Let them each have a wound from an arrow or spear to brood over at home, a going-away present as they jump on their ships, and a lesson to others to not make war on Troy. Heralds should proclaim throughout the city that boys in graybeards bivouac tonight, all around the city on our god-built walls. As for the women, each of them should light a fire in her house. The city needs to guard against a sneak attack while the army is away. Enough for now. This is sound strategy. In the morning, I will address the troops again. I hope and pray to Zeus and all gods to drive off this visitation of foreign dogs. The fates have brought us in the black ships. For tonight, we will take care of ourselves. At the crack of dawn, we arm ourselves and hit the Greeks hard in their beachhead camp. I will find out whether the great Diomedes will drive me back from the ships to our wall, or whether I will walk off with his bloody gear. And tomorrow he will know what he is made of, and whether he can stand up to my spear. My hunch is that he will find himself lying wounded in the front lines with his friends all around him at sunup tomorrow. I wish I were as sure of immortality and eternal youth and honor like Apollo's and Pallas Athena's, as I am that this is a black day for the Greeks." Thus Hector and the Trojans cheered. They unyoked their sweating horses and tethered them with thongs to their chariots. They brought cattle and sheep from the city, got bread and mellow wine from their houses, and gathered firewood. They offered bulls by the hundred to the immortal gods, and on shore winds carried the smoky savor up to the sky. But the blessed ones disdained to partake. They abhorred holy Ilion, and Priam, and the people under Priam's ash spear. But the Trojans had great notions that night, sitting on the bridge of war by their watchfires. Stars, crowds of them in the sky, sharp in the moon glow when the wind falls and all the cliffs and hills and peaks stand out, and the air shears down from heaven, and all the stars are visible, and the watching shepherd smiles. So the bonfires between the Greek ships and the banks of the Xanthus burning on the plain before Ilion, and 50 men warmed their hands by the flames of each fire, and the horses champed white barley, standing by their chariots waiting for dawn to take her seat on brocaded cushions. And that is it for book 9. Sorry, 8. 9 was the last thing I saw. So yeah, that is it for book 8 tonight. Well, all right. So some things that I find interesting about this one is this. One of the main focal points of this book, book 8, is the scales that Zeus holds. And he weighs the scales and he watches them, and they show that the Trojans are to win this day. And that's really interesting to me. And so what I've, because shouldn't Zeus make that decision? Well, no, because in Greek mythology, Zeus didn't really decide what would happen. Fate, the Greeks believed in fate. But they also believed that fate could be changed, but that there were consequences to that. And that Zeus's job was to fulfill fate. Now, of course, you have the Fates, the 3 Fates, who are characters, and they weave time. We've talked a bit about them before. And so Zeus's job as the head Olympian is to make sure that fate is fulfilled. And so he weighs the scales to see what's supposed to happen. Now, another thing that we see about fate in this is that there are prophecies, and there is a sense of knowing what the future is. And we actually get a glimpse into that when Zeus is talking about, Achilles is not going to rise up until something happens. And he says what that something is. And when I read that, I'm like, are they really going to tell us, this is what's going to happen? But we also get to see, let's see here, an interesting reference early on in this, where Zeus has all of the other immortals around him, or all of the other gods and goddesses, because there are immortals who are not gods and goddesses, like Chiron, the centaur, and so and so. But he has all of the Greek gods and goddesses around him on Olympus, and he tells them, all right, this is how it's going to be. Don't argue with me. And he says, if you want to argue, you can all try and rise up. And then he says, hang a gold cable down from the sky. And to pull him down. Now, that just might be, oh, it's a gold cable, but that actually, I believe, is a reference to something that has been mentioned before in this book early on, when Achilles was talking to his mother Thetis at the beginning of book one, or end of book one, excuse me. He said, we remember that Thetis saved Zeus at one point. All right, and that is its own story. And part of that story is that Hera and Poseidon and the other Olympians rose up against Zeus and tried to subdue him, but Thetis saved him. Zeus punished the Olympians for this. Now, I've mentioned before that Zeus and Hera have a complicated relationship, and I've kind of been spreading that out over these episodes talking about that. Where Zeus is the most unfaithful male who ever lived in any type of literature, theology, or mythology or anything. Zeus has, Anyway, very unfaithful husband. Conversely, Hera is the goddess of marriage and family, and she also is known as the Virgin Goddess. Well, how can that be possible if she has many children with Zeus? Well, because it was known that every, I think, spring, Hera would bathe in a certain... every year, Hera would bathe in a certain spring, and that would regenerate her virginity, so to speak. So in that way, she was even more of an opposite of Zeus, which it makes sense that you would have the two heads of the universe kind of be married in your pantheon of gods, because then together they encapsulate all of the values, where you got like order and chaos together and all that. Sort of like a yin-yang thing. But the issue is when these two people are supposed to have a marriage together, and you get all kinds of problems, obviously. Now, Hera tried once to overcome Zeus. And in fact, she was raped by Zeus early on. He was like, please marry me. And she said no for 300 years. And then he tricked her into thinking he was a sparrow. And she's like, oh, I like birds, and it's shivering. And she put him under her breast, and then he turned into Zeus and raped her. And feeling ashamed and not wanting to, admit that she was raped, she agreed to marry him. So this is pretty dark. There's oh my goodness, wow, yeah, that 0 to 60 real quick. Now, when Hera rose up against Zeus with the other gods and goddesses, and Zeus won because he was saved by Thetis, who, oh my gosh, I guess, could you wonder why Hera doesn't like Thetis very much, or why she doesn't like Achilles by extension? Zeus punished Hera, and the way that he did that was by hanging her from the sky with golden chains and attached anvils to her feet. I don't remember if I've told you guys this or not, but I'm going to reiterate if I have. So he was stretching her down from the sky, and she would only be released if she vowed that she would never rise up against Zeus again. And since she is the goddess of marriage and, in a weird way, commitment and other things like that, her word was unbreakable in that way. So she never rose up against or conspired against Zeus again. But that's why she takes all her anger out on Zeus's children, like Hercules. Like, if you look at the Hercules myths and stuff, which are also mentioned in this book, and Athena mentions, oh yeah, I had to help Hercules out a lot because he just couldn't get all these things done. There's this story of the 12 labors of Hercules, which is its own thing, which is mentioned there. When he says hang a gold cable down from the sky, he's kind of reminding them what happened last time they tried to overcome him. It's pretty dark. And of course, he's always threatening to beat them up and all that. I think it's interesting also that we hear that the Trojans, there's a smaller army but much more desperate to engage the enemy. They were fighting for their children and for their wives. That's kind of making the Trojans sound like the good guys. But then also at the end here is saying that the immortals, they abhorred holy Ilion and Priam. Why? It's Zeus seems pretty neutral here. He's letting the Trojans win. He's trying to fulfill fate. We get to see some thunderbolts thrown down. And the rest of the gods and goddesses at this point are kind of, I mean, Poseidon was annoyed with the Greeks recently because of their wall, but a lot of them are really, even if they have temples there, are trying to just smash Ilion. They hate it. It's almost like a kind of a Tower of Babel thing. Almost with, like, hey, you guys are impressive, let's kill you. I don't know. I mean, obviously we get Hera and Athena who are upset and mad at Paris and hate Aphrodite because of the whole apple thing, which is what this is all about. But, that's that. Okay, so I think that's, about... I thought it was kind of cool when Diomedes rides up to Nestor. He's like, hey, let's do this together, old man. And Nestor's like, you got it, sonny. And they go along and they're about to, kill a bunch of people, but then Zeus scares them off. And Diomedes is like, man, everyone's going to think I'm a real wuss. And Nestor's like, son, no one's going to think that. Let's go. Kind of a humorous moment, I think, there. And, yeah, so I think that's about what I was going to go over with my analysis and the commentary and such. So let's see what we got going in our chat. Now, let's see. So, beginning our chat stuff here. So, Joe says, good evening, all. Well, you know what? Good evening to you, Joe. I think you've been here for, every episode. And so, super fan. Actually, a bunch of you are pretty awesome in that way. So, I think it's really cool that people are always watching this. So, thank you for being here. Bubba the musician says, just in time, I think? Yes, I think, yeah, Bubba, you showed up like right before everything really started. So, let's see. Joe says, why did you choose the battle hymn? Oh, yeah. Why did I choose battle hymn for the opening sequence, the battle hymn of the Republic? Good question. Oh, and in fact, there was a question before that I didn't answer, which was asking about, I totally forgot to go over some of the questions at the beginning, which was from last episode, which was Bubba wanted me to talk about the opening title scroll art in there. So yeah, I guess those both have to do with the intro. So battle hymn for the Republic. Well, I chose that for a few reasons. But you've got the tune. When I was building this show and trying to figure out what the intro would be like, I had a bunch of different ideas that I was trying to do, and I settled on what it is now, and I'm very happy with it. But Battle Hymn for the Republic, just some of the words in it, like the glory, glory, hallelujah, glory, glory, hallelujah. There's that version of it, which is a lot of what Iliad is about. It really does glorify war half the time. But there's also another version of Battle Hymn of the Republic, where it's like, glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. And there's like a darker version of it as well that paratroopers will sing, among other people, and I think that's also what Iliad is about. So I think having a first off, it's epic and it's a great bit of music, but it has a very military-oriented background to it, which I think works with the theme for the show. But also lyrically, there's some things that kind of match up or are a little ironic that I thought made a lot of sense. I thought I'd just kind of put everything into a good tone. There were a couple... there weren't really other pieces of music that I seriously considered. Like, I looked around for a while, like, what could I use and stuff, but that was really, I think, the first one that I really liked, that I thought about using, and then I looked around a little more, and I didn't really have anything else that really captured me the same way. So I went with that one. Now, as far as the art in the opening title scroll, I'm actually going to turn this on. Let me see if I can. Let's see. I'm gonna see if I can do this intro. Hang on, let me turn the music off for it. Okay, so, alright, so I'm gonna show you this. First off, I'll talk about this picture real quick. On the right here, of course, is me. And on the left is actually Achilles, and we're playing a game called Fid-Chell. And I'm gesticulating there because I'm, talking to him, and he's smiling a bit because hopefully he finds what I say entertaining. And on me, I've got a bunch of personal symbols. I've got the Isle of Man, 3 legs of man and stuff, and a couple other things I'll talk about some other time. So, here with this piece of art, I actually drew this. And I actually drew it a while ago. This was something I did when I was at university studying art. And I just wanted to have the sort of the long history of warfare in a way, in a sort of abstract way. Here you see you've got a knight, you've got a samurai, you've got a Native American, Eastern Woodlands in the bottom there. We've got some British people, World War One, Revolutionary War, Civil War. We see the evolution of planes and ships. And then we have a GI there who's part of the Go Broke, what's it called, platoon, battalion, whatever. And of course it ending with the nuke, the big mushroom cloud. And I just thought that was actually part of an assignment in university when I did that, which the theme was just supposed to be like transitions. And I went with that one, and I thought that was something kind of interesting that worked with this, because on the one hand it's historical. We also have these different art styles for like the charioteer, who looks kind of hieroglyphic. And as far as, I mean, I guess I could talk about that piece more and more for a while. I put a lot of thought into it, but the how it relates to Iliad, obviously there's the military aspect to it, but Iliad I have found is, the reason why this is interesting is because everything it says in it is basically true. It's whether it factually happened and all that stuff is not what I mean, or whether Greek mythology is real or whatever. I don't mean that, but in the same way that Watership Down is true if you think of the rabbits as people or something. And also you can see Stanley Lombardo thinks similarly by picking this D-Day photograph as the cover for his translation. So this story is largely about war. This is a war story. I don't think it's too hard to argue that. But yeah, also there's this idea that in the drawing that war goes on forever. Like you're never going to have a time where there isn't any. But that's kind of the idea of having the nuke at the end, which is sort of, and the GI being like freaked out by it, which is that, it's going to be the end for somebody, and it might be the end for all of us at some point. I don't want to explain art too much, I guess, but those were the kinds of things going through my mind, is how Iliad could relate to all of those people at war, as it does today, from what I understand. Let's see. Next up we have... the son was going to or did kill his father. I don't know what that means, Bubba. So don't get it. Oh, I see. The son was going to kill his father, so don't get any ideas. All right, I gotcha. That makes more sense to me. He was talking about the, don't get any ideas quote from episode 7. Bubba the musician. I asked about the opening charcoal drawing with the artwork. Whose artwork is it? Oh, well, I just went over that. Yeah, that's mine. I did all that. And years ago. All right, Stacy asks, how many books are there in all again? 24. So we're not even halfway there. Whoa, please don't stop watching this show. And so yeah, there's 24 books. What's the deal with the 2 Ajaxes? Asks Joe. What's the deal with the 2 Ajaxes? There are 2 of them. They are brothers. There's Ajax the Greater, who's the giant of a man with a big tower of a shield that actually managed to stop a spear thrown by Hector in episode 7. And there's Ajax the Lesser, who is not a giant of a man. He's actually a small guy, but apparently is the best of the Achaeans with a spear. So there are these 2 brothers who, one's big, one's short, and they're both badasses. So that's how it goes. But good question. Yeah. Let's see. Is there some significance to Athena's gray eyes? Good question. Well, let's see. I'll look more into that, because as far as the gods go, I don't think she has any more ability at seeing the future than any of the rest of them. She is the goddess of wisdom, That may have something to do with it. Maybe the Greeks just thought it was cool, but I'll look into that. Maybe she took those eyes from some creature in a story, but I'm actually not sure. Good question, Joe. I'll have to look that up. I'm surprised I never wondered. I just always thought it was cool. Let's see. I'll look that up for you, Joe. Joe asks, I guess it's a descriptor like Hera's white arms. Yeah, okay. So Goram Darthkal says, why specifically long-haired Greeks? The Greeks had long hair, you know. There's actually that was true for a very long time. The Spartans, especially, were known for having very long black hair that they would take very good care of. Actually, hair was also a good descriptor for status at the time. So I think it was in Athens. That like if when a woman became married, she would cut her hair short. I meant to mention. I'm not sure if I mentioned that in the episode of the Home Front, but that isn't the only woman episode, obviously. So something else I want to talk about was that there was a lot of young women would be like in arranged, well, guys obviously too would be in the arranged marriage if it's arranged, but younger women would be really worried and like, you know, have a lot of anxiety and freaked out by that. So it wasn't something that women were super down with all the time, or girls weren't. Women sometimes were, girls weren't. And they like as far as age, whatever. And there was they called it like illness of the maidens, when a girl was really like super apprehensive about getting married, and suicide was not uncommon for them in that. Now, of course, the doctors at the time said like, oh, well, the cure for this is to get them married even faster, which is like how far Western medicine has come, is all I've got to say. So yeah, that's a nice little tangent. But yeah, long-haired Greeks, they had long hair, especially back then. And I guess the Trojans culturally would not have had their hair as long. Perhaps that was a descriptor between the two. Part of the thing is that it's really hard to know some of this stuff, though, because this is like really old history. Like even the ancient Greeks during like the classical age and stuff, they were hundreds of years past when this battle is supposed to have happened. So culturally, there were a lot of differences as well as just far as the look. Even in battle, when this story became really popular, the Greeks weren't really using chariots in warfare anymore. They weren't using bronze. So it's interesting that Homer knows some things that would be impossible for him to know, sort of, given that he was born probably like 400 years or something after this battle. But there's little weird things that Homer knows. He knows like that there's this helmet made out of boar's tusks, which people would not have made at the time he was alive, but we have found archaeological, like, had helmets that are made out of boar's tusks. He knows about the bronze. He knows about how the charioteers worked and all this stuff. And in fact, one of the best things that he knew is that there's a part we haven't gotten to yet. This isn't super a spoiler, but it's not a spoiler. The walls of Troy are sloped. Okay, so they're not straight up and down walls. It's like the walls go out, kind of like a very steep hill. All right, and so you could actually kind of climb these things. And at the time that Homer was alive, people weren't making walls like that anymore. And they didn't know about any walls that were really like that. People were making walls straight up and down. When we found Troy, the archaeological site, which is a World Heritage Site now, has been excavated, and the part of the excavation that is considered to be when the Battle of Troy was, the walls are sloped, which no one could have known at the time Homer was alive. So this is a story that there's a lot of information here that is definitely being passed down through oral tradition, which is just incredible to me. So yeah, let's see. Long-haired Greeks. Yes, okay, so the Trojans were rednecks, says Bubba the Musician. Let's see. Yes, Joe said I heard a character named Toker tonight, so maybe they're hippies. Perhaps they were into a lot of stuff hippies are into today. Bubba says every time the opening credits come on, I laugh not because it is funny, but because it is so well done. Well, thank you. And Bubba says, I knew it. You drew it. Ah, yes. And Go for Broke Battalion. There we go. 442 Regimental Combat Team. Yeah, so the GI at the end of the intro, the American soldier with the Thompson M1A1 machine gun, which is my favorite submachine gun. Yes, I have a favorite. Is in fact, hang on, let me show you something cool. um, just as a bit of a tangent here. I don't get to show too many people this. So this is actually an airsoft gun. The big orange tip on it. But Thompson M1A1 is my favorite type of submachine gun, which you may know as just the Tommy gun, but I like it with the stick mag because that's what Audie Murphy had in his excellent film To Hell and Back. Let's see, safety's on, good. All right, yeah. So the idea was to have the Go for Broke GI soldier from World War II at the end there. For a bunch of reasons. One is because now the Go for Broke Battalion, has nothing to do with Homer, but you might find interesting. They were an all-Japanese American unit during the Second World War. Second World War, weren't we fighting the Japanese? Yes. These were Japanese Americans, and you may know that all of the Japanese Americans in North America were put into internment camps. But there was a battalion of Japanese Americans who fought against the Germans for the United States, obviously, in the Second World War. And they are the most heavily decorated battalion from the war. And they got more medals of honor than anybody. A lot of them were given those medals later on because, racism and stuff. So as time went by, people looked at the records like, these guys really got the short end of the stick here. We ought to recognize them. And so that's why Mr. Miyagi in The Karate Kid has a Medal of Honor. But it's tying everything together. So yeah, but having, obviously, the first time an atom bomb was dropped in war was Hiroshima, and then you have Nagasaki as well, which of course are in Japan. I just thought there was a lot to read into for having the American soldier at the end of the line be a Japanese American soldier watching a nuclear holocaust. And all the weird things that can imply. Anyway, so I think that's about it for us tonight, though. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this cool episode. We got some more action in there. We got to learn a little bit more about the gods and goddesses and all the rest of it. And I hope to see you this Thursday for episode 9. And with that, I think we're just about ready to wrap up. That's it. Yeah, so thanks a lot for stopping by, and I hope I see you Thursday. Have a wonderful evening. And I wonder if you'll remember what Zeus said has to happen before Achilles comes back. Dun dun dun.